I want to show you repair of the Sony camcorder. The symptoms were no autofocus, quite slow zooming. Camera was turning on, but clearly wasn't fully functional. Cosmetic condition is excellent, as you can see. There is hardly any signs of use. The type of the camera is Sony Handycam CCD TR705E. There's quite a few of these cameras you can still buy around. Most of the used cameras will be, if not all of them, will be non-working due to the bad capacitors. And as we can see later in this video, you need to change all of them, and then the camera usually is going to work. So remove straps first, and then we'll take the cassette compartment door cover, 2 screws. Put these 2 screws away because they are quite unique. They are a little bit longer and thinner than the rest of the screws. And then we need to separate the case. The case for the camcorder consists of 3 parts. There's front part, right and left. All the screws that need to be undone there is like a double arrow next to the screw, so all these screws need to be removed. Here is the memory battery CR2025. You don't have to really remove it because it's part of the case, but I think it's a good idea to remove all the electrical supply. And here it is. We remove all the screws. Here are the plugs for the sockets that also need to be removed. These 2 screws here are slightly different, or 3 screws are slightly different. And there is the screws that go around the lens go into the plastic, and are again a little bit longer. So screws undone, we can separate the right hand side. So we start with the right hand side part of the casing, and also the front, the part where the mics are, should separate. And now we have to remove some connectors that are attached to the front part. As you can see, the right hand side casing is removed. That's what you can do if you want to work on the tape mechanism. Then you need to only remove this right hand side part. And here it is, 2 connectors that needs to be removed on the mic section. And that's the microphone section. The front part of the casing is removed. The next step is going to be to remove all other screws that are still in place. You can remove here the connector for the battery. So that's the connector that goes that connects. This is the lead that connects connector to between the battery and the power supply unit inside the camera. Here it is, a little bit more screws. And this is the longest screw I was talking about. So again, put these 2 separately. Or 3, actually 3 longer screws that go into the plastic rather than into the metal. As you can see, these screws are a little bit longer than the screws that are on the separate, that are used more frequently. Here you can see there's a much longer screw that goes here into the lens. And there is one more hidden screw that is very easy to miss. It's inside. All other screws are outside. You can access them from outside, but this one is inside. And without it, you cannot really remove this left-hand side cover. So it's important to remember about that. And we remove, and that's again the longer one. So here there are 3 longer screws. And now basically you need to separate, you need to disconnect the casing over the buttons, and here is a connector next to the tripod plate. There's a connector that needs to be disengaged. That goes into the main board. Here it is. I can see it. Here it is. Yeah. So we open that. Here we go. And there is one more connector in the front that also needs to be disconnected. A lead that goes here into the I/O board. And one more that goes to the main board. Actually on the top. Here it is. So 3 connectors that 3 leads that need to be disconnected to separate the left-hand side of the casing. And that's the camera without the casing, without all these plastic covers. It's again in good shape. It never has been opened before, so it never been repaired. We start with removing the power supply board. So 2 connectors that provides power to the rest of the camera, and then there is just 1 screw at the bottom that needs to be undone, and you can remove the whole PSU. It is switching power supply, and that's why it has all this shielding around to prevent the noise. There's lots of capacitors in this PSU, but they're good quality through hole capacitors, and I found this power supply to be pretty good. Whenever I opened it in the other cameras, there was usually a reasonably very rarely capacitors over there needed any change. And here, more screws just to remove the top plate, top PCB that we can see, the PCB with the camera, with the lens. Sorry. So there's several screws basically around this PCB that needs to be undone. Here it is, the little support that holds the PCB, top of the PCB in place, but also provides a support for the casing. This is a screw that not necessarily needs to be undone at this stage. It holds this connector to the left-hand side of the casing that we removed before. It's pretty much loose right now, and we should be able to separate it. There are 2 tapes, ribbon connectors at the top that needs to be undone in a moment in order to remove this PCB. 3 actually ribbon connectors. Here you can see them. Yeah. So we remove these 3 ribbon connectors. Here it is, and we can remove the whole lens assembly and put it away for later repair, and all the capacitors that needs to be done over there. Here really you could, you don't really have to remove this PCB to do the repair, because there is no any electrolytic capacitors on the underneath side of this PCB. You can see the capacitor, the big capacitor, sitting literally next to where my hand is at the moment. My left hand is at the moment, and that's the only capacitor that needs to be changed on this board. You don't need to do anything else. But for the convenience, I decided to remove it. And we're also going to remove in a moment the I/O board that is here in the front, just under this front microphone cover. This is where you can see there's lots of electrolytic caps sitting there, and that's probably the part of this repair that requires the most labor and skills, because all these capacitors are quite packed very close to each other, and that's why it's not easy. But here it is. We're going to just simply lift the board. There's just a connector underneath. You don't need to worry about it. Basically, pull it to the front, and then it's going to separate. Obviously, I'm trying to do it gently, but there isn't anything that really can go wrong here. Here it is. Yeah. Here you can see the connector underneath, the white one. Yeah, that's the connector, sort of sitting on the PCB here. So just can pull it out. And now we're going to remove this PCB. Although, as I said, for this repair, really, I could leave it in place, save myself a little bit of time. But for the completeness of disassembly all the electronics, I think we're going to do that. So here the two screws that hold. We need to separate this metal frame that goes around the camcorder. Here, as you can see, the two screws that were in the front of the camera are separated. Here there were two screws here at the back, and we need to remove the standby and a recording button from this frame, and here it is. The whole frame is removed. You need to remove this frame because otherwise you cannot get to the connectors under this frame underneath, and they're connecting to this PCB. There's several of them. There are connectors between the video head and the motor, and all the sensors that are in the cassette compartment. This is the motor power supply, the red one, the little one. Here it is. The motor, to be precise, the motor that opens and closes the battery compartment. Here are some sensors. Just sort of like push fit, but they're quite tight fit. So occasionally it is not easy to remove them. So I need to use a piece of toothpick, basically. It gives me a little bit of leverage. The other one is easier to do when the connector that sits here underneath is removed. This is the signal connector. This is where the signal goes between the video head and the PCB board. So that's why it's shielded. And there's just one more screw that holds the battery in place. So there are two screws. This PCB is held by two screws at the bottom, kind of the on the PCB. Here it is. Let's open the catch, and we can remove the connector. Connectors are pretty good quality. So and all these ribbons are also good quality. So very rarely there is a problem with them. They're quite. I would say much better than what you can see in the electronics 40 years later. Right, now all that should lift. Here it is, a little bit more. And one more here at the bottom that needs to be undone. help of the screwdriver, it's a little bit easier to undo it. And here it is. The whole PCB is removed. Two ribbons at the top that go to the LCD and all the buttons. And as I said, there is literally only that's the whole cassette assembly. All the mechanical parts here. So normally, if the cassette loading mechanism is broken, but the electronics in the other camera is good with the broken mechanics, then you can basically swap them. So there's the steps that you need to do to swap that. And that's a PCB with literally just one capacitor that you can very clearly see it's one big capacitor. I removed this electrolytics with brute force, so basically pliers and just twist. This camera, it wasn't terrible. There was electrolyte leak, definitely. In a moment you'll see the PCB that is dirty underneath this capacitor, so clearly there was some leak, but it wasn't too bad. Here you can see a little bit of a dirt where the capacitor was sitting. Here in this corner, here it is. You can see some electrolyte, some dirt there with electrolyte. So first I'm going to clear this electrolyte with isopropyl alcohol before doing anything else. And try to sort of tidy up a little bit the PCB that was under the capacitor and all the surroundings, so it's free from any electrolyte. The problem with electrolyte obviously is that it is a very strong corrosive, so it will eat through any connectors, through any soldiers that are around. Then a little bit of flux on the old solder parts, and I'm going to remove it using the solder wick, copper solder wick. I'm going to remove the old solder from the parts. Here we remove the solder nicely. Again, Sony used a reasonably good quality solder, so it's easy to melt. And we're cleaning again the parts with old solder removed. Again, isopropyl alcohol, just to finally tidy up everything, all the flux that I used a moment ago, and any further residue of the electrolyte, of the leak and the dirt that is still there. Here it is with a cotton swab and small amount of fresh flux, and a new capacitor, a little bit of a flux on the capacitor parts. And what we need to do next is to put a little bit of a solder on the part, on the PCB. Yeah. And then taking a careful note of the polarization. Electrolytic capacitors, as you know, have positive and negative terminal. So, and here it is. The soldering itself, it is quite difficult to show the soldering because I'm not using any camera close-ups here. So all you could probably see is the back of my head when I lean over the PCB during soldering. So that's why I skipped this part, but that's literally soldering both capacitors. And the PCB goes back in place. So the two ribbon connectors at the top, again, this is LCD and and all the buttons. At the top there is no any screws. There is support that this PCB needs to go into. There is a little metal parts that will hold the top of the PCB. So when you remove it, just pay attention at how it sits. That's why I'm sort of like turning this PCB, this camera, quite often left and right, up and down, just to see how this how the arrangements around these hooks and certain support for the components looks like. And now we have to reconnect all those ribbons again. So that's the bottom of the camera. Connector at the bottom of the camera. That's quite it can be quite delicate, so be careful. This is again the motor, power supply to the motor that ejects cassette. These are some sensors over there. This is the signal cable. This is where the video signal comes from the video head. And again, some sensors. This one is quite tight. I found this to be reasonably tight. This middle one. Okay. And now, do not forget about the shield that needs to go on this video head connector. Here we go. We need to replace this shield, and then the screw that is holding back both shield and the PCB. And then there is another screw on the other side of the PCB. Here it is. So this is just two screws that hold this PCB in place, both at the bottom of the PCB. And that's the repair of this part of the electronics done. Now we need to replace this metal bracket that goes around the camera, from the bottom and rear part of the camera. Here it is, good orientation. At the top, yeah, this needs to go through the hole here, and at the top there are like little slot that accepts this part of the metal. So just put some attention how this should sit at the top. Here it is. And then there are 5 screws that hold this piece in place. 2 in the front, 2 at the back of the camera, and just 1 underneath next to the tripod plate. It's a little bit fiddly to get everything in place, because when you do one side, then the other side tends to jump up. Here it is, yeah, little slot that needs to go into the place. That's what I was showing a moment ago, right? So that's 2 screws over there, 1 at the bottom, and here 2 screws. 1 is holding this catch in place, and that's where we start. Needs to have a black screw, short black screw. Here it is. And then next to this screw, a little bit more to the left of the camera, left hand side of the camera, there is another screw that holds the front of this bracket in place. Here we go. There's the second screw in the front. And then there are 2 screws here at the back. Again, as I said, while you do one side, the other side jumps out. Here it is. Yeah, one screw goes in here, similar to the front, and then there's one screw at the top that I'm not doing at the moment, but there is one. And here one screw at the bottom next to the tripod plate. So that is, this bracket is in place. Now we're going to work on the PCB with the lens. So first we need to remove the lens. The lens is held by 3 screws, 1, 2 and 3. So we need to undo these 3 screws, put them separately because they are again a little bit longer and not compatible with any other screws around. Right. And now there is one more thing that needs to be done. We need to desolder this joint. So this is the shields for the sensor that are, and shields for the on the PCB that are connected. Here there is also a lead that connects the shield with the lens. So we need to undo the screw. And here you can see a little wire and the bracket. This is a bracket for the case that holds the case in place. Here it is, goes off, and you can see probably a wire. Here it is. That's the wire that provides ground to the lens and to the bracket, to the cover. A little bit of a flux to disconnect, to desolder both shields. Again, solder weak, and we are removing the solder, and hopefully both metal parts are going to both metal parts separate in a short time. Yeah, solder removed, and just a tiny bit of solder that still holds them together. Here we go. Solder removed, both shields separated. And now all you need to do is just lift the lens assembly off the main PCB. There are 2 connectors that hold this assembly in place. You're going to see them in a moment. Yeah, that's assembly, and that is at the bottom. So that's one connector, and then the second connector. You can see 2 white connectors that the lens was. Okay. And here are capacitors that we need to remove and replace. And there's one capacitor under this shield. But first I'm going to remove the foam. Then it's supposed to separate the noises from inside the camera, and also a dust from outside of the camera into the PCB. Can be quite easily removed with the. It's still quite sticky after all those years, which I'm surprised that the tapes the glue has still not dried. And here we need to open this shield because there is one capacitor underneath this shield that also needs to be replaced, one SMD capacitor that sits there. There are 2 solder joints. I've noticed that in the same camera, depending probably on how the assembly was done, the solder points can be in variable parts of this. I guess it depends who was. I guess this was done manually, basically by workers, and depending on who was doing the soldering. Here it is, one side undone and the second side undone. And here you can see the capacitor. Here we go. That was sitting under the shield. And again, a brute force. So 1, 2. Some of them are quite stubborn. Although I found electrolyte under each of them, there was a leak. So even if they are still reasonably firmly attached to the to the PCB. Definitely they needed to be done. Without this repair, without this replacing them, you never know if even if one or two of these capacitors still do maintain some of the capacitance and are not completely dead. You never know what it's going to happen in a month or two or a year. So when the camera is open, I think it makes perfect sense to replace all of these electrolytics. There is no unless you want to do it really for a very specific purpose, and you don't want to play and go the full repair. But I cannot see any sense in that. I think if we decide to repair it, I think it's better to do it properly. So here you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 capacitors that need to be replaced on this board. Similar like we did before. So clean, flux, remove the old solder, reflux, put some solder on the cleaned paths, and then solder the capacitors into the position. I'm not telling you about values. I don't remember them from the top of my head at the moment. But the repair manual is clearly available online with a very precise schematic. So there is you can find this information very easily. And obviously, while you remove the capacitors, you'll see the values. All of these capacitors are very nicely, very clearly marked. So here it is. The capacitor is in place. You can see the 4 of them are in place, and here is the 5th one. And that's the only exception to replacing SMDs with SMDs. Here I'm doing the I do the through hole capacitors, 10 microfarads. It is a very interesting capacitor. They put that very small diameter SMD, 10 microfarads. I just couldn't find it anywhere easily accessible. So that's why this one was replaced with a through hole capacitor. And there's plenty of room there, so you can do it. That's not a problem. So that's the only capacitor that was replaced with a THD. Cover replaced. The shield is being replaced. All the tapes I basically left the original tapes. There's plenty of glue in them. They're quite sticky, so there's no point of replacing them with a new one. And this is one board. This is this foam that we removed carefully earlier that prevents dust and noise from the outside and inside of the camera. Dust from the outside and noise from the inside camera that would leak into the mic. There's still plenty of noise coming from the zoom and from the camera motor that leaks into the microphones. So I think it makes perfect sense to have external microphone, I think. And here we need the lens assembly needs to go back on the PCB. There is no any capacitors on the lens assembly, so that's not a problem. You don't need to work over there. There is this clear plastic cover that you can see next to my thumb where I'm holding the lens assembly. You can remove this plastic cover and re-grease the all the mechanism, all the sort of like zoom and the focus mechanism, but I haven't decided to do this. This grease that is originally there, despite all the years, is still in pretty good shape. So I found that you don't need to do that. And then you just click the connectors in place. Here it is. There is little plastic guides that need to go through the PCB that locates the lens, and now the 3 screws that we undone before that holds the lens assembly needs to be redone. That's now in place. This little bracket and this ground wire that provides ground to it needs to go in place. Here it is. Yeah, and as you can see also this is a longer screws. So all the screws that goes into the plastic bits, they are longer. So as a definition, if you mixed up your screws and you don't know really whether the short or the long should go into place, the long ones go into the plastic parts, the short ones go into the metal. And then this is the lens assembly board that needs to be attached to the main board connector. Here it is. Just so I put it in place. Not quite there. Yeah, I think it clicked. Just make sure it's tightly, nicely good. And obviously we need to resolder these 2 shields as we desoldered them earlier. A little bit of a flux into the soldering spot, and then solder gun, and let's connect them back again. Just waiting for the solder gun to heat up, and here it is. Good, all soldering done. Right. As I said, this connector is completely separate, connector to the left-hand side of the casing. That didn't have to be undone at the very beginning. So here I've done it, and now the 3 connectors that we've done that connect the lens assembly PCB with the main PCB. All that needs to be redone. These connectors. Here we go. We attach them. A little bit fiddly. I mean, you can do it probably with some form of forceps, gently. But this camera is quite nice to work on. It's not too difficult, I must say. Right. And here is the little bracket that holds the top of the PCB in place. It's just 1 screw, and then 1 screw goes at the bottom. And the whole assembly is back. Now we connect the standby and recording button. We put it back in place. And now the only thing that needs to be done is just 1 electrolytic capacitor that is in the microphone assembly in the front of the camera case. There's just 1 screw that we need to undo to remove this little PCB with the microphone amplifier. Yeah. And then there are 2 connectors at the back, to the right and to the left microphone. So it's a good idea to put them in exactly the same orientation, because otherwise the right and left is going to be reversed. Here it is. And there's 1 47 microfarad capacitor that needs to be replaced on this board. Here it is again, how the orientation looks like, the colors of the connectors. And again, we remove the electrolytic capacitor, and the same technique as we used before: isopropyl alcohol, a little bit of a flux, removed all solder, remove parts if they broke off the capacitor. Here we go. Clean the parts. Clean the parts with isopropyl again. Flux. Clean the parts. Choose the capacitor, correct size, correct value. A little bit of flux on the parts, and we solder the capacitor in place. Here it is. Done. And the microphone board goes in its place. One screw, and that's done. And the connectors hopefully are exactly in the same orientation, and that's probably the most laborious part of this repair. You can see plenty of electrolytic caps here on this input-output audio board. I'm not sure if the video signal goes through this board. It's definitely the stereo audio signal that comes into and out of the camera. That this is coming from. You can see plenty of small 4 volts electrolytic caps, and the part of the problem is they're quite close to each other, so soldering them is a little bit fiddly. I try not to remove, and I didn't remove really any other components, but I guess it would be easier sometimes to remove some of the resistors and other non-electrolytic caps that are in the vicinity of this side to get a better access. Now, I tried to replace electrolytics with electrolytics because that would preserve the same characteristic of the board, of the sound, and I really wanted this camera to have exactly the same quality of sound as it was in the original, so that's why I tried to use electrolytics. I couldn't find a really small diameter 22 farads 4 volts capacitors. I just couldn't find them anywhere. So these are the only 4 capacitors, electrolytic capacitors, that were replaced with tantalum capacitors. In some previous repairs, I quite successfully replaced them with multi-layer ceramic capacitors, MLCC. It works. I couldn't see any big problem, and MLCCs are much smaller, so they are easier to put in place. So if you just want to repair the camera and you don't want to, you're not too fussy about exactly the same sound qualities as in the original cameras, you can replace these capacitors that are on this board with MLCCs. It's going to be much easier to do because MLCCs are smaller. Most of these capacitors are rated at 4 volts, so really the MLCCs will be quite small and easy to put in place. As I said, I try to retain the same qualities. MLCCs have microphonic effect, so in the audio pathways, they're not always the favorites. Because, especially small ones, because they can pick up some noise from outside and introduce this to the sound. And the sound in this camera is already so noisy, as I said, because of all the motors that are inside. and the vibrations of the case. So I guess that's why Sony used the electrolytic capacitors originally in the sound audio pathway. That's why I try to replace them with electrolytics wherever I can. So most of them are electrolytic capacitors. Yeah, a little bit of a toothbrush, just to make sure that it's all clean between other components. The same principle, as you can see, that takes a little bit of time to really go through through all these parts. How many of them? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. If I'm not mistaken, 15 cups. If I calculate it, if I counted all of them. But that's a good exercise if you want to practice your soldering skills. So the board is ready. The old cups go into the rubbish bin. And here is the new set. It's worth to do a little bit of tidying up before starting soldering. And here it is, the 4 tantalum capacitors, the yellow bits that you can see at the bottom of the screen at the moment. These are the only capacitors that will be done differently to the original. There will be different characteristics to the original. I think tantalums in the audio use is not the end of the world. I think they should work reasonably well. And here a strategy is really important. So what you solder first, what you solder next. So you have to think. It's a little bit like a chess game. You need to think about the next move, because the first one is obviously very easy to put in. The last one is probably the most difficult, where everything else is in place and you have just a little bit of tiny space around. Sometimes it's even difficult to put the tip of the solder gun next to the soldering path. So it can be tricky. But this is all only audio board. So if you're not too worried about audio, if you are not going to use the input-output sockets on the side of the camera, maybe you don't have to do that. Maybe you could just skip this part if you are only interested in getting a signal and a video and audio signal on the tape and off the tape without using these boards. Maybe you could skip. And here it is, the tantalum, 22 microfarad tantalum capacitor that goes in place. It's not that small. I think it's very similar to in terms of the diameter and its length. So this electrolytics and this tantalum is probably similar, but the tantalum is a little bit flatter, so it's easier to work around it. And you can sort of like put it a little bit to the side, because the soldering part is slightly longer. So I think it's easier to solder simply. So that's why you have to remember on the tantalum capacitors the electrode that is marked is positive electrode, not negative electrode like in the electrolytics. So you need to remember to about polarization and the proper orientation of the tantalum versus electrolytics. It's very easy to forget about it in the heat of the moment. So here it is, using a little bit of forceps to hold this stubborn one in place. in real life, here it is obviously on the fast forward. In the real life, it probably takes about an hour to do this board, I would guess. I think here, this one at the bottom was really difficult for some reason. I don't know why, but I just struggled to get this one in soldered properly. All others were relatively straightforward. So 3 more electrolytics and the board will be ready. Yeah, and this is the 100 micro that goes in place. Great. And the board is ready. So we need to put this board now in its place. So it is in the front of the camera, below the microphone assembly. Put it in at an angle. Here is the connector that needs to go into its place on the board. Here it is at an angle, just to jump in place before the lens, behind the lens. Here it is, and you just push it in, and then there is just one screw at the bottom. It's worth to use some form of help to push it down. It may not be enough of place for my thick fingers. And as I said, one screw that holds it at the bottom. Right. And now we are ready to connect this ribbon connector. To open the catch, open the lock, slide this in nicely and all the way in, not at an angle, needs to go straight in, and we close the lock. That's done. Now it's time for the power supply. As I said, I usually don't open the power supply. If the camera works, it works. If there is a problem with it, if the camera still doesn't work properly, especially if there is you can see the charging indicator is sort of like playing up, then it is worth to look inside. But I found a really good quality through the whole capacitors, electrolytics in there. These electrolytics inside are reduced height capacitors, so they're a little bit more expensive than the regular ones, and it can take a little bit of money to replace it. So if it's not required, I wouldn't worry about it. They're probably going to work for some time still, even after all those years, since 1991 when the camera was manufactured. Here the 2 connectors that provide power to the whole electronics. Yeah, that's done. Then the battery connector that goes into the PSU. Click in. And I think we are ready for the casing to go back. All the electronics, all the PCBs are in place. Everything is all right. So here we go. We start with the left-hand side of the casing, And here you can see all the connectors. Yeah, give it a little bit of a wipe to the LCD and the little window on the casing to make sure there are no finger marks. The dust is removed, so you have a nice clean view onto the LCD. You can see all the connectors, all 4 connectors need to go in place. 2 of them are for the front camera, the rest goes, the other 2 go into the PCB, and you just need to sort of like push it into its place. Here at the bottom the tripod plate needs to engage with it, and on top the case needs to slide over the buttons and over the switch, power switch. Here it is, clicked in place. Brilliant. Now the battery connector goes in place. Make sure you tuck in the wire that goes there. Behind that, this is the eject button. Check it's working. It's in place above the switch that is underneath. Yeah, and now we can put the connectors back. So we start with the long screws. 2 go from the outside into the lens. Yeah, one at the bottom and the other one goes at the top. And then there is 1 screw from the inside. As I said, there's just this 1 screw that holds it in the inside, and here's. So the lens top and the bottom of the lens, and in the inside these are these long plastic screws. Now the rest of the screws that hold the casing in place is just short screws because they go against the metal. This one actually that I've done a moment ago will need to be undone in a moment. But basically look for the holes that are marked with double arrow, and all these holes need to have a screw in. Here, one at the top. There's one underneath the cover. Cassette door cover. Now the next step I want to do, because it's a kind of full service, so I want to open the cassette tray and clean the video head with isopropyl alcohol. Here it is, the power. Hooray, it's working. And here the cassette compartment is open. And now I have a good access to the video head drum, and I'm going to clean it. So there is a little bit of a paper strip with isopropyl alcohol again, and you basically rotate the drum against this paper. That should clean all the dirt. Never use any cotton swabs. Never use anything that can get inside of the head. So the heads are sitting inside of these drums, and you should never try and touch them basically, or go inside this little spots where in the drum where the heads are. There are very delicate coils there. Right, so mechanism closes, and we can continue then with closing the mechanism. So that's basically what you should do if you want to clean the video head properly. You need to remove the right hand side of the camera, and then that's how it should be cleaned. So again, one more connector that needs to go in place. As I said, that's from the left hand side. Yeah, 2 connectors from this left hand side casing. 2 connectors to the front cover, to the mic assembly. There are no connectors to the right hand side. This just clicks in place. The front cover. There are some catches, plastic catches that need to engage. Here it is, and then we finally replace the right hand side. Right hand side plastic. As I said, this screw was done a little bit too early, but it was done on purpose. I just wanted the rear of the left hand side assembly to be in place. Make sure that all is nicely overlapping. There is no tension. It all needs to sit inside without any springing back. And again, all the screws, all the holes, each hole with the double arrows need to have a screw in them. There's a bit of a dirt around the strap area there. So the toothbrush is quite useful to clean the dirt from between the buttons and from difficult to reach areas. Great. And that's the final screw. As I said, there is one underneath the battery case cover. It needs to go on top. Brilliant. Blower, just to get rid of any dust that could happen there. And two screws, last two screws, to put the cassette compartment cover in place. These are these longer, thinner screws. Strap, adjust the strap. Remember about the lens cover in a moment. That also needs to be attached to this strap. Yeah, there's a blanking. Here it is, as I said. Remember about this lens to be attached to the strap. And now finally we're going to clean the lens. So a little bit of remove the dust with the blower first. Then solution to clean the optics. And then some microfiber glasses cloth to clean the optics. And the camera is done. And this is the repair that's been finished. Now the camera is fully working. It's working beautifully. It is really like new. As I said, it is in beautiful condition. So I have basically like new camera, Sony camcorder, CCD TR705E from 1991 that works as it should. Hi8 camera, handycam. And these are all the caps that we replace. Every single caps that was replaced during this repair. Yeah. Don't forget about the memory camera, because otherwise it won't hold time and date. Brilliant. Okay. Thank you.